There. Okay. I would like to call to order the April 2017 meeting of the Audit Committee. The first item on our agenda is approval of the January 10th, 2017 Audit Committee minutes. Are there any comments, suggestions, changes to those minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
From Paul?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Farrell, are you there in New York as well?
I'm here. I'm here.
Hello, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We annually review the Audit Committee charter. This year, the staff has not made any recommendations for changes. I don't have any recommendations for changes. Is there anyone on the committee that would like to say anything about the charter? Otherwise, do we have to take any action? Okay, good. I would then like to turn it over to Karen Ellinger for a presentation on the internal controls.
Thank you, John. This is my annual presentation to the Audit Committee for the Internal Control Program. And we have a new member this year, so some things may be a repeat for some of you that have been on the committee in the past, but for the new member, it may be some new information. I had a handout for everyone, so I'm going to start with the internal control update page, the first page. And I just want to give a brief update on the internal control framework. In 2013, the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, which is sort of the overall internal control guideline organization, updated their internal control guidelines, and the Comptroller's Office updated the internal control standards in March of 2016. And basically what OSC did is they restated and affirmed the updated standards that COSO put out. The key areas of focus or enhancement in the update in 2013 was information technology was added for the first time. It was very much a part of the internal control standards. Outside service providers are mentioned for the first time as more and more organizations use outside service providers. COSO felt it was important to include that focus in the internal control standards, and also an updated focus on corporate governance and risk assessment. So those are the three key areas that were added or more stringently discussed in the standards. The standards continue to have 5 components, and those 5 components have been broken into 17 principles that support each of those components. And then there are 87 points of focus, which gets down to the nitty-gritty of exactly what you should have in your internal control program to ensure that you have a robust and successful program. The reason they did the update in 2013 was to provide clarity for designing and implementing your internal control systems and to understand the requirements for an effective system. Does anybody have any questions about the update at this point? Okay. Item 2 on my agenda is our process. A little bit of history going back to the Government Accountability Audit and Internal Control Act that was put in place in 1987 and it was made permanent in 1999. So we are governed by that law. The Authority Budget Office also has recommended guidance. The Authority's Budget Office was established in 2006 as part of the Public Authorities Accountability Act, and in 2009 the Public Authorities Reform Act made the Authority's Budget Office an independent entity, and we are subject to their recommended guidance and requirements. As part of our internal control program, we've discussed in the past our annual internal control certification. We are required to sign or certify that our internal control program is in existence and that it's being reviewed by management. The March 31st, 2017 document has not yet been issued by the Division of the Budget. We and many state agencies are eagerly awaiting that document, and when that document is issued, we will review it to see what changes may or may not have been made. Just to give you a little understanding, last year that document did not get issued until April 22nd, and state agencies only have until April 30th to certify, so they're hoping to see that document very soon. But because we fall under the authority's budget office, we have 90 days after fiscal year end to certify.
Karen, who executes our certificate?
I put the document together, and Gerard, as the head of the organization, signs that document. And we include that in your June 30th or June board meeting package as part of the authority budget office document. It's a rather large document. But with Gerard signing that, it goes to my last bullet item under there, under item 2. We have management employees, all of the management employees at DASNY that have been here at least 6 months are asked to certify to the internal control program. Basically what they're asked to certify to is the establishment and maintenance of an internal control system, because that's what Gerard has to certify up to at the end of the year. This year we have 41 individuals who will certify to support Gerard's signature on our organization-wide internal control certification. And just as a reminder to everyone, the internal control system is the responsibility of management, which is why we ask the management employees to certify that we have a program in place and that it's being maintained on a regular basis.
When they certify, are they certifying that there is an internal control program, or are they certifying that they believe it's effective?
They are certifying that we have a program and that there's regular review of that program to ensure that it is as effective as it can be.
Are they in any way certifying as to the sufficiency of the program, or simply that it exists and it's being reviewed?
That it exists, it's being reviewed, and that it's effective the fact that it's in place and that it's effective.
So that in their view, it is effective, it is in place, it's maintained, and it is effective in what it's supposed to do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
All 41 of them do that?
Yes.
Okay.
And each certification is tailored to the individual signer. So for example, Kim Nadeau's certification is very different than Mike Corrigan's perhaps, which is very different than Mike Cusack's, and his might be similar to Debbie Drescher's. Kathy Everett's would look a little bit different. So we tailor each certification to the individual signer and the division in which they work.
And Karen, is that something you do?
Yes.
That is, you write these
Yes.
certifications?
Yes.
Thank you.
And if we have, someone has a concern, we discuss it. I work with counsel, I work with Mike, who is my boss, to resolve any concerns that individuals have. We've been doing these since, I believe, 2006. I think that's the first year. So, we've had these in place a long time.
To what extent do concerns get raised, and how often are there concerns that are raised?
Generally, the only concerns we have are for new employees, because we want to make sure they're comfortable and they understand what they're signing. But for those that have been here for a while and understand our internal control program and are comfortable with our program, we rarely have any issues there.
Okay.
Any other questions on our assessment process? The last item on my agenda is our internal control program specifically. We have internal control guidelines that are in place that are approved by this committee. And what I plan to do over the course of the next few months is review those guidelines in conjunction with the updated internal control framework that I discussed earlier. I will make any revisions that I determine may be necessary because of those changes, and I intend to have those available in time for our October Audit Committee meeting if we need to make changes so that they could be approved.
I don't want to put you on the spot,
But you will.
you can deflect, you can defer. What would be an example of one of the 87 points of focus?
Well,
Is there 87 of them?
there are 87 points of focus. So a point of focus has that we consider materiality in the implementation of our internal control program. I brought my cheat sheet. Deloitte put together a summary because Deloitte was involved in the update to the internal control standards, and they put together a summary that lists all the documents or all the points of focus. So consideration of materiality, reasonability, those types of things would be in consideration.
Do you see any of the certifications that are prepared for the individual reports?
You're asking Gerard? I've never seen them. No.
Would you consider, would it make sense to just to sample? Say,
Yeah, I'd be curious.
2 or 3 of them and just take a look.
I would be curious, absolutely. Yeah.
We will work that out
Okay.
offline.
You know where I am?
I do. I know how to find you.
Yes.
Okay, I had trouble hearing the question just now.
I'm
John.
sorry, Paul, it's Al, and I was asking whether John had ever reviewed any of the certifications that the 41 employees are asked to execute. He had not, and I asked whether it might make sense for him to do a sampling of them, 2 or 3 of them, just so he could get a comfort level that A, he has seen them, and B, from where he sits, they're appropriate.
Got it, thank you.
That is something that our auditors review, or our external auditors review as well?
No, those are internal documents that we use to support Gerard's certification. The external auditors review Gerard's certification and the document that supports it.
Okay.
Okay. I would also like to give the committee an update on the control self-assessments, and they are on the attachment to my agenda. Over the course of the last 10 or 12 years, we completed a number of control self-assessment documents, and what those are, they were functional area documents that looked at the activities within a particular functional area. They looked at the risk to accomplishment of our goals in that particular activity, and we looked at what controls we have in place to ensure that we meet our objectives. And if you look at the top of the document, the original CSAs are listed there. And what we did is we identified the number of team members on each control self-assessment, because these were cross-functional teams where appropriate. So you may have had people from finance, you may have had people from council, public finance. Any of our divisions or even departments within a division may have worked on these control self-assessments together. I've also identified the number of activities, risks, and controls within each of those control self-assessments. And in the initial brush, when we went through this document, we had over 100 people working on those control self-assessments. Now, sometimes a person may have worked on more than one, so they would have been counted twice. But in addition to the team members, I or my predecessor as the internal control officer worked on every single one of these. So in addition to the team members, there was an internal control person participating on the control self-assessment.
So looking at, let's take grants as an example.
Okay.
There are 22 risks that you've identified and 172 controls.
You're looking, yeah, grants had actually 59 risks
Okay, sorry, I looked at the wrong line.
Yeah.
And 172.
and 172 controls at the time we completed that.
So what would, can you, I mean, again,
So,
what's an example of one of the 172 controls?
an example of a control is that we ensure the appropriate signatures are in place on the required documents that we come in. So the grant disbursement agreement is signed by an appropriate person
Yes.
to sign for that grant. Another control might be that there's a review by the appropriate level person in our grants unit to ensure that the documents are there. There may be a reference to ensure that the project is for the stated purpose of the grant program, because we have a number of different grant programs, and you know, you can, in each grant program, it's specified what the money may and may not be used for. There may be matching funds that are, religion is a consideration that we need to make sure that it's not for a religious affiliated organization. So those are some of the controls that we would have in place to make sure that each of the grant programs is fulfilling its mission.
So somewhere there is an itemization of all 172 of the controls?
Yes, there is.
Okay. It's on your list.
Yes, there is. These are very robust documents, and they're very time consuming.
Yeah. Okay.
In addition to that, if you look at the bottom of that document, we are updating the original control self-assessments with a couple of exceptions. We deferred the disbursements control self-assessment because of the e-payables initiative, and we anticipate completing that control self-assessment in the fall. We also have deferred the opportunities program control self-assessment because we were redoing procedures and looking at a program in its entirety. So we felt it would make more sense to wait until those changes were in place. And we are also still working on the construction litigation observations that came out of the initial control self-assessment. So we felt it was prudent to wait until we had addressed those observations before we took another look at that particular CSA.
And when was the original CSA done?
On construction litigation, or just in general?
In general, yeah.
They've been done over the course of the last 10 to 12 years. I mean, we've got 20, I think there's 22 or 24 of them listed in the original list.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been done over time.
And are they? And how often are they updated?
It depends on the functional area. What we did, for example, in the construction division, we initially did what was called project management and procurement. And then as time went on, we started looking at certain areas a little more succinctly. So, for example, on the original list, we had job order contracting, which was really a subset of the, I think it was the project management control self-assessment. So what we've started doing in certain areas is drilling down a little bit more. Another one that came out of the construction division was disposal of hazardous waste and materials. That came out of project management. Environmental issues arising during construction, that came out of both project management and the SEQR, the State Environmental Quality Review. So we've expanded on the initial grouping that was completed, and we continue to review and update where we might have particular concerns. Again, it goes back to management's responsibility for internal controls. So if they have a particular concern, we may go ahead and look at a control self-assessment in that particular area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess one more question. I'm still learning how this process works, but so the certification we discussed was management employees that the program is in place and is effective, essentially.
Yes.
At what point is there a more granular review of that the internal controls are in fact all being complied with? Is that part of the audit process, or how does that happen?
A part of that would be through the audit process. A part of that would be through each individual manager's responsibilities to ensure that the controls in place in their individual units and divisions are functioning as intended. So we go about it in a couple of different ways to ensure that management is comfortable signing their certifications, which in turn gives Gerard comfort in signing his overall certifications. Furthermore, the control self-assessments are in place to help management see where they may or may not have a good control process around one of their functions. So the control self-assessments support the management certifications, which in turn support the overall certification for Gerard.
Got it.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so as I mentioned, we're updating the control self-assessments. We've completed a few of them to date, and I've listed those. Just as an aside, budget and payroll was initially a single control self-assessment. It's now been broken into two down below because those units have been split apart. So we've completed, since the original set, 6, and we are working toward completion of the rest in the next few months. In addition, in support of our internal control program, I have ongoing coordination with internal audit. When Kathy is getting ready to do an audit, she looks for the control self-assessments and she uses them in her planning. And I won't say any more about that. That's for her to discuss. But we do have coordination between our two functions, and that's very important to our internal control program overall. And lastly, although the internal control system is the responsibility of management, each and every employee has a role in the internal control structure here at DASNY, and that is really the backbone of our program. So on an annual basis, each DASNY employee completes the required internal control statewide training to support their understanding of the internal control program. And I do get calls and questions from time to time on internal controls. If someone has a question, they think, you know, more often than not, it's, I don't think we need to do this anymore because, and there may be a good reason. We may have automated something so we no longer need the manual control. We've been trying to do a lot of that and to make ourselves more efficient. So that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Karen.
Anyone has any further questions?
Further questions?
No?
Thank you.
Nothing. All set. Thank you.
That was excellent. Kathy Everett will do the internal audit report. Kathy?
Thank you. So the first document, 2 documents from me. The first one I'm going to look at is the internal audit strategic plan. This year I put together a more comprehensive plan than in prior years, as is required by the IIA's practices framework. So if you can please turn to page 3. I'll start here by going through our purpose, vision, and mission. The purpose of the strategy is to really provide a roadmap to make sure that we effectively allocate our resources to meet stakeholder expectations and to provide an independent and objective assessment of governance, risk, management, and control processes. So essentially, the audit department can be leveraged to do many things, and because we have limited resources, we have to identify what we should focus on. So this document should be viewed as a living document that should be updated as there's changes to our organization, whether people or processes, or if there's a change in the direction our shareholder or stakeholders want us to pursue. Our vision is to be really a business partner and a trusted advisor. and our mission is to deliver an independent assessment of risk and control effectiveness, provide control expertise to minimize risks, and to deliver value-added services. Value-added services can be defined many ways. Some of the examples that we strive to deliver is using our time efficiently, allocating our resources appropriately, and providing a product that is useful. You can please turn to page 4. Page 4 highlights our key stakeholders and our critical success factors. Our stakeholders are classified as either primary or indirect, and our success factors that help us achieve our mission and our vision include our position, our process, and our people. Please turn to page 5. Page 5 defines our critical success factors. Our position is that we report directly to the audit committee and administratively to the president. Our processes include our methodologies that are defined and documented in our manual, which conform to standards. And under our people, it's having and retaining the appropriate skills and other competencies to be able to deliver again on our vision and our mission. On page 6, there's several types of sourcing methodologies. We use limited co-sourcing, where the majority of our work is performed by internal resources, and we use outsourced resources for our technology audits. This page shows our organization chart, where we have our team and our outsourced services. I'll get into more details regarding our open position, our staffing, and approach shortly. Please turn to page 7. This page reflects our core functions. It's nothing you haven't seen before. It includes our process audits, our construction project and IT audits, and other special requests. Page 8. This goes through our supporting functions, this page. So you continually hear a lot about our annual plan, our risk assessment, even our quality reviews. So this page displays other key tasks we perform to support those core functions as well as the organization as they align with the 3 critical success factors. And I'll highlight just some of them for you. We continuously follow up on open recommendations. We remain current with standards. We coordinate with the ICO, as Karen had just mentioned. We work on increasing productivity, recruit and retain staff, participate in organization work groups, provide advice to operations staff, and we also network with other public and private internal audit departments for benchmarking and best practices. If you can please turn to page 9. Page 9 now summarizes our key initiatives that we're going to work on throughout the year. While these initiatives most likely will be consistent from year to year, it's the underlying tasks to accomplish these initiatives that could change. So summarizing them really quickly, we develop an annual risk assessment and audit plan. We continue to refine our internal processes. We increase productivity, communicate to stakeholders, and we evaluate our resources to determine our collective capability regarding our required skills and other necessary competencies. Please turn to page 10. The next 6 pages outline each one of those initiatives and the related success factor, objective, and key tasks. The timing to complete each of these tasks is summarized at the end of this document. So the first one everyone is very familiar with, our annual risk assessment and audit plan. Our results are impacted by our position in the organization and our process. We accomplish this by working with management to identify risk factors and business functions, to rate each function and propose a plan, and this process typically begins in the fall and ends in the first quarter of the year. Please turn to 11, page 11. This is our second initiative, where we continue to refine our internal processes to align with standards and our business goals. Here we remain current with the standards. We update our charter and our audit manual accordingly. We perform internal and external assessments or periodic reviews and implement the results of those reviews. I just also wanted to note that we have had updated standards effective first of the year, so consequently we are currently updating our processes accordingly. Timing for these areas are across the board, and as I mentioned, they are highlighted in the last page of this document. Please turn to page 12. This one is to increase our productivity and eliminate redundancies in the audit process. And I do think this one's really exciting because we're going to be using technology and some automated tools to help us not only meet our standards, but to become more efficient. So those efficiencies will also help us with time to analyze our product versus just time for input. To list a couple, we're working on automating our open recommendations and follow-up. We're automating our metrics and creating a workflow to maintain version control for our work papers and supervisory approvals. IS has already started working on these areas and making some great headway, and we're targeting completion this summer. If you can please turn to page 13. Our fourth initiative is reporting to key stakeholders. We do this by delivering communications through forums such as this, engagement, entrance, and exit meetings, routine meetings, and reporting with members of executive and operational management to report on results, metrics, and open recommendations. The timing for this is really ongoing throughout the year and continuous. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to John.
May I please have a motion to go into executive session to discuss the financial history of a particular corporation and matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation.
So moved.
Okay, we are out of executive session. I note that no action was taken in executive session other than to come out of executive session. Is there any other business to come before the meeting? Hearing none, could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Beryl. Paul, I saw your
Second.
hand go up. There's a second. All in favor? Aye. I think we're adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.